So the 1982 Honda Magna V45 has to be one of the funnest, kind of stupid bikes I've ever ridden, but it has one huge flaw. Let's get into it. So you saw me do a couple modifications to my Magna, and before I even did these modifications, I was aware of this issue. And when I bought the bike, the guy had told me that he replaced the clutch, but had no paperwork. So I kind of wrote that off as the clutch is junk and it needs a new one. So I was riding this bike and I was going over the bridge, and I was in sixth gear. I went to go give it some throttle, get around someone, and my bike went from like 5,000 RPM to about 9,000 RPM and held there. As I was accelerating very slightly, I let back off the throttle and it went back down to 5,000 RPM. Unfortunately, there's pretty much only one thing that points to, and that is the clutch is junk. I had a suspicion when I first bought the bike that the clutch was starting to feel a little bit weak, and it came to fruition on my ride the other week. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this cover off. We're going to take our clutches that have been soaking for a while. We're going to replace the discs, the steels, the springs, the oil filter. This oil filter is a 51334 XP. It was the only Wix filter I could get on kind of short notice. Usually I would use the Honda oil filter or the K&N or even the high flow, but all of those were going to take about 2 weeks to get here, and I kind of didn't want to wait that long. So we went with the Wix. I'm pretty sure there's only like 2 oil filter manufacturers anyway. Most of them just put their own stickers on stuff, but that aside, we're going to drain the oil out of this thing, and I'm going to show you how to do it the more right way this time. One of you in the comments actually pointed out that there is a plug up here on the front that you have to take that plug out to get a little bit of residual oil from the top end of the front cylinders. So we're going to take that out, take our drain plug out, change the filter, take this cover off, and when we're all done, we're going to wrap it up with some genuine GN4 Honda oil, which I have links to in the description. Anyway, let's get it drained and stuff, and we'll get into this clutch. Stay tuned. So it's the same thing to drain the oil. It's a 17mm socket. Take the drain plug out. Make sure you vent it, otherwise this thing will kind of burble if you got one of these. But this one up front, this is a 10mm. So we're going to swap that out and get that removed. And hopefully oil comes out of here. There was a concern where I thought coolant might come out of here, so I'm really hoping it's going to be engine oil. Really hoping it's going to be engine oil. Long. Yep. Sure is. A little bit of engine oil in there. So shout out to that one guy that commented about that drain plug. I didn't know that. And there's not a lot of information out there about that. So thank you for your input. So let's start popping some of this stuff off, and let's dig in and see what we can find. So quick tip for getting this cover off. I mean, what are the chances this cover has been off since 1982? Probably pretty low. So fairly low, even in the last 20 years. Who cares? Anyway, these 2 tools, a pry bar and a lady's foot. Some people call these a crow foot, even though that's not the right term. Lady's foot, whatever. One of these pry bars. You take it right on this lip on the bottom here. You take your pry bar just as a spacer, and then you take this other pry bar and you pry out on this corner, just ever so slightly, working it back and forth. And then that's how you're able to get this clutch cover off. I want to share that quick tip with you. We're going to take this thing off and we're going to do some inspecting. So unfortunately, right off the bat, you can smell it. It's in the air. These clutches are junk. You can see here on the pressure plate, it's even starting to show a little bit of grooving on there. Hopefully that turns out for you guys. So there was a little bit of grooving, and you can tell right off the bat, give these things a little sniff, they're burnt. They are burned. These must be OEM. It's kind of goofy too. You can see here on the disc itself, it's dimpled, kind of funny. Similar to like when you put something in the vise too tight, it has those dimples. Very similar on here. I don't know if that was like a way to keep it from glazing or maybe to keep some heat off of it, but it is oil cooled, so I don't know. But yeah, right off the bat, nice and burnt. Junk. So these are gonna go in the garbage. We're gonna take these all off and we're gonna replace them with our new stuff. Not sponsored or anything, but if they want to, these are Barnett's clutches. They had the whole kit. They had the clutches, the springs, and all these discs in stock. I think I got them in like 3 days. Not bad. So thank you, Barnett's, for having the only clutches that I could find for a decent price for the Honda Magna. So we're gonna swap this stuff out, get this all installed, and hopefully ride this thing tonight. So with the Magna being fairly old, you can see right here between the new spring and the old spring. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but just that little bit in height is gonna let off just a little bit of pressure. So the chances of it being the springs, maybe a little bit. The chances of it being the old clutches that are just worn down or glazed, probably pretty high. I'm really happy that I was able to get new springs, and these feel a little bit stiffer, but they're definitely a lot thicker. So we're gonna slam these 5 new clutch springs back in our Magna. We got our new clutches in here and discs. So we're gonna slam this all together, get that cover back on, and we're gonna test it out. So for the bolts, we went in a star pattern. So we started here, 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 so on and so forth, just a couple turns at a time, getting them all to compress the clutch pack evenly. So right now we're gonna torque it. I found some conflicting torque specs, but I think I'm gonna go with 100 inch-pounds. It's ever so slightly higher than 8 foot-pounds. And I believe on a lot of the metric stuff, this is a 10 millimeter head, but the thread size is an M6. And on a lot of that stuff, it usually ends up being like 8.3. So here we go. And that's it. These are all torqued. We're gonna scrape this gasket off. Scrape the gasket off of there too. And we're gonna use just a couple dabs of Yamabond all the way around that thing. I couldn't find a gasket. Maybe you guys can. What I should have done is bought some gasket and just cut out around it. But I like using Yamabond for stuff, or Hondabond, or whatever you have. Some general RTV, and then just dabbing it very nicely, and then wiping it when you're done. Because you don't want it to look like the CBR and whoever did the stator cover on that thing. Yikes. So we're gonna get that done, and we'll get back with you guys. Okay, so we got the cover all cleaned off. We ended up using a buffing, one of those little 2-inch buffing wheels. We cleaned up the surface on here. We cleaned up, well, obviously both surfaces. And then we placed just a thin layer of Yamabond all the way around, just enough so that when it squeezed it, it pushed a little bit out. Then we took it in a rag and we cleaned up all the excess so it's not all goopy, gross looking. And we torqued all of our bolts to 100 inch-pounds. And now it's time to build back up. Another thing I forgot to mention, we put our foot peg back on. So to take the cover off, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the beginning. You have to take out these two. They're 6 millimeter hex head or Allen's. And then I took out the stop just to make it easier to take out the hexes. But outside of that, we got all that stuff back on. So now we're gonna fill this thing back up with oil, run it, make sure our levels are good, and then we're gonna go on a test drive and test the thing out. Stay tuned. Okay, so we got the bike back together. My shifter was being kind of weird, so we're gonna take this thing for a test drive. But yeah, our fluids are all topped off and good, no leaks. So we're gonna screw you guys onto the bike and we're gonna ride this thing around. Stay tuned. Clutch is better. Now my shifter's getting stuck in the up position. Always something. Hey guys, we're back with a couple problems on the Magna. So the Magna was having a hard time shifting after I put this cover back on. And apparently the gasket spaces the cover out just enough for this little dimple, this piece right here, that pushes right on the shift shaft. And when I tightened it all down and torqued it, this was pushing just enough on the shift shaft to allow it to not shift up, which was driving me absolutely insane. I think, oh God, maybe a quarter mile down the road, and I was like, that's it, I'm done. So what I'm gonna do, and it's up to you if you guys want to do it too, I am going to clean this cover again. I'm going to shave this down just ever so slightly, bolt it all on, make sure that it shifts up and down nice and happy, and then I'm going to re-RTV this and slap it back on and run it that way. Arguably the right thing to do would be to buy the gasket. I'm just nervous about the quality of the gasket because I don't want to be doing this 500 times, and I know this RTV is going to seal. I like using the RTV rather than a gasket because you get a paper gasket and a lot of times they're made really cheaply. Up to you guys. I don't know. This is the way I'm going to do it. Roast me in the comments. But yeah, so we're going to shave this down a little bit and slap it back on. Stay tuned. So I got the cover off, and this was the little piece that was protruding just too far and was causing that shifter not to shift correctly. So I just ground it down pretty much flush with where it comes out, or where this support piece kind of comes into it. Ground that down flush, and we got this all cleaned up now. We're going to put some more silicone Yama Bond on here, bolt it up, and then fill it back up with oil, and check for leaks, and try it out again. So it's a little bit crappier today, but we'll do some riding around anyway, and maybe we'll try out maybe doing a little burnout or, I don't know, something. But yeah, stay tuned. Okay, so we took the Magna for a cruise. As you guys see, no more clutch slipping. This thing shifts like a mother and it goes like hell. So, I don't know, I'm really happy with it. I think the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to try and do, little papa wheelies and maybe try and do some burnouts and drifts and see what we can do with this thing. But yeah, part 2 of the Hondavidson Dynamag.